Hello, this is Frank Donaldson, and would like to welcome you to class number 2, Understanding Catholic School Development Advancement, 25 Lessons Learned. We'd like to start, as we always do, with an opening prayer. So let us remember we're in the holy presence of God. God our Father, we thank you for having called us together that we may humbly serve you. Send your Holy Spirit upon us and remain present among us to lead us in the presentation and discussions we will have. Bless our words and thoughts with holiness, that we may be fitting instruments of your grace. Let us be open to new ideas, new insights, and the willingness to change if needed. Please let us continue to build our community at our own Catholic school. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. As we begin class number 2, this is actually a re-recording of a class that we had some audio difficulties with early on today. And so we're going ahead and re-recording this class and sending it out. So this class will be a bit shorter than the one you attended earlier, and also will be a little bit cleaner in the sense that we will not be going in and answering questions or wondering out loud what happened to our audio. A couple of housekeeping pieces that I'd like to mention to you. Please make sure that you have your name on your homework assignments when you send them in. I realize they come in with your email, but sometimes we can get mixed up with that. And so it's always good if you just make sure your name is on the homework. And then because of the number of students that we have in the class, we've brought in someone to help us in terms of keeping track of the homework. And so if you could also copy your homework assignments to Karen, and her email is there. So please send it to me, Frank Donaldson, and also to Karen Hintz. That would be great. Also, please let us know if you'll not be attending a specific class. That just lets us kind of keep track of that. And then obviously everyone will be receiving a copy of the video, and everyone will be receiving the homework assignments and things of this nature. So you should be good to go with that. We just want to make sure that you are kind of let us know when you're not going to be there in terms of being able to attend the live presentation. If you remember, in our first class, we talked a lot about the philosophy and fundamentals. We talked about such things as the 7I process. We talked about belonging leads to believing. We talked about that development and advancement are indeed the meaningful involvement of people in your mission and vision for the future. And then we went through 3 lessons. We talked about involvement and relationship building. We talked about the importance of mission, vision, and core values. And we talked about leadership, that the life and vitality of your Catholic school continues with leadership. We also recognized in today's class, and over the last couple of weeks, with the hurricanes that have been experienced in Texas and also in Florida, and with the aftermath of those storms, in not only those areas, but in other areas, there are a number of people who are unable to get their homework assignments in. And obviously, we are fully understanding that. Because of that, I'm staying away and stayed away in today's class from actually sharing some homework assignments and what people said. I'll plan to do that in class number 3. But thoughts and prayers are out with everyone. We certainly know about all that here in the New Orleans area, but did want to mention that to you. Notwithstanding, I do want to thank several people who in lesson 3 actually downloaded and read and wrote summaries of Dr. Michael Gilgott's dissertation on leadership, The Road Less Traveled. I was really happy to see that. So just wanted to mention that as we move on through. In this lesson, this class today, we're dealing with 2 lessons. One is how do we build community through communication? And then how do we move from a fundraising culture to a true Catholic school development culture? two that are very, very important. As we talk about this idea of building community, we're talking about the whole idea of all vehicles of communication in terms of making all this work. If you remember at the end of class 1, I put this particular slide on the screen, and I said that I was going to be referring to it. I'd like to continue to do so. This, to us, is the recommended organizational structure for successful Catholic school development and advancement. As you can see, Catholic school leaders make the decision to have a development effort. And that development advancement office with officers can be full-time with multiple people. It could be a one-person shop. It could be a part-time venture. It could be a volunteer to begin with. But we also saw the importance of people fuel to the left, and we will talk at length in one of the lessons about the value of the core team. The ability to create a strategic advancement plan that are centered around 6 areas for Catholic schools: constituent records, which is database, communications, which we'll talk about in this class, enrollment management, fund development, which is the annual fund, the capital campaign, the endowment campaign, major gift work, memorial giving, alumni involvement and engagement, and then the last box, fundraising events, of which we also will allude to today in class number 2. We find that this organizational structure centered around these 6 boxes can certainly help you in terms of communicating what development/advancement is, and also be able to help you set up your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month operation. When we talk about communication, we talk about effectiveness and how efficient it is. I remember starting back years ago, and there were very few tools in the toolbox. We knew, for example, that we could send out direct mail. We knew that there was a phone. But we have so many things that are available today. I told a story today in the class of doing a workshop in the Diocese of Syracuse a number of years ago, and Bishop Moynihan, who was the bishop at that time, had attended one of the workshops. And he asked me at the break, he said, "Frank, what are you seeing as the number one challenge that we do face in our Catholic schools?" I said, "Bishop, honestly, to me, it's communication." How many times we hear the sentence or the question, when did they decide to do that? Which in a way is somewhat tragic. Today, we have more opportunities to connect than ever before. And yet at the same time, with all of these vehicles, which ones do we use? Do we know which ones our quote unquote publics want us to use? And as we remember in class number 1, we talked about the 7 I's, the identification, and then obviously informing, the information. That's what we're talking about today, information. How do we inform people? How do we keep them informed? And how do we build it as a two-way street? And then obviously we look at personally involving people, seeing our people that get involved help us implement, people realizing they're vested, and realizing that we always want to constantly improve. So as we look at this and we move this forward, what becomes important is that we have a lot of communication vehicles. Now, in no order of importance, on the screen, you see things like website and bulk mailing, personal direct mail, social media, email, individually, where we individually email blasts to groups of people, electronic and hard copy newsletters and flyers and posters, and even some schools have apps, announcements from the pulpit, or announcements over the speaker, text messaging. There are many, many vehicles today that we have, many. And yet at the same time as we talk about it, these vehicles you just saw, we find that they really do 3 things. They announce something, they position something, and they reinforce. They don't really do what we call seal the deal. They don't really move people to action. But yet they're effective because as you see them again, they do once again announce something. I can announce something here. I can post something, post it on our website. I can remind people of things. I can reinforce something. But once again, what we're looking at is how do we move to action? And so what we say is with your key constituent base, we find it is important that 7 times a year that you communicate with every key constituent, and when possible, eyeball to eyeball 2 of those 7 times. The ability to move from a reactive to a proactive method of communication becomes key. But it will require you, whether you're the pastor, whether you're the president, whether you're the principal, whether you're the advancement officer, whether you're the board member, whether you're the faculty member, whether you're a person who works in the development advancement marketing office, it's going to require you to get out of your office and meet with people. Today, we are in a different culture. We are in a different ball game, playing a much, much, much more competitive and challenging game than we did 25 or 30 years ago. And we can look around and see that every step of the way. So as we move toward this and as we look at all of this, I think that becomes really, really important that we understand we have collected some data through the years that we see that's right on target, that direct mail, email, texting, website postings to build relationships now, convince somebody of something, move people to action, is 5 to 8% effective. 5 to 8% effective. Phone conversations, because we have dialogue, we can have a conversation. It jumps up to 15 to 18% effective. And then eyeball to eyeball, 45 to 55% effective. 45 to 55% effective of moving to action. The ability to do this in one-on-one, small groups, medium-sized groups, or whatever becomes unbelievable in terms of making all this work and making all this happen. Let's go back to this. I'm going to share a story with you. Just in the last 2 days, I was part of a 9th grade coffee at this one school. And at this 9th grade coffee, we had about 40 or 50 parents from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And these parents were invited personally with a personal phone call, with a nice invitation, and they were invited by the president and the principal. And 40 or 50, even though it was in working hours, they showed up. At this particular coffee, we shared with them some exciting things happening about the school. We had a couple of students who talked about their journey. These were seniors. We had a faculty member speak about the importance of advancement and the fact that federal funding was lost this year greatly for professional growth opportunities and professional development, and how it was important that advancement moved that forward. We talked about advancement and how it was organized at this school and what were some of the main processes the school was doing. And then we asked a question you've heard from me before. We asked the question, by December 1st, how will you know that your child is having a really good school year? And the responses we got were interesting. We handed out an input sheet in which we invited people to raise their hand. Could you come and help us? Would you be an advancement ambassador? Could you help us make phone calls to invite people? Could you help us with the Parent Gap Drive phone-a-thon? Could you help us with the alum appeal phone-a-thon? Could you help us with this golf tournament? Could you help us with this spring fling? Could you help us to invite alums to come in class by class so we can gather further information about what some of the alums are doing. It was a great conversation, and we closed by talking about the gap and the difference between tuition and what it actually costs to educate their child. And we broke those numbers down. And the responses were, when we moved to Q&A, was, gosh, we never knew all this was going on. And we never really had the gap explained to us like this. We always wondered, gosh, why are you doing all this revenue generation when you should have all the money you need? What was interesting was that after the coffee, I had 3 or 4 conversations with people that I'd never met before. One lady came up and introduced herself, once again, eyeball to eyeball, one-on-one, and said, I was a development person in the nonprofit world and would love to be able to work with the school. And immediately we were able to sync what her talents and gifts were. She had run the phone outreach for the nonprofit. We had another gentleman who said, I do strategic planning with my company. Immediately, we were able to link him to a strategic planning workshop we have coming up. We had another lady who, said, one of the things that I really have worked with before, and I'll be glad to do, is I have done graphic design. I've done a lot of proofreading, and I've kind of stepped away from this to have some children, but I would love to be able to help you. Immediately, we're able to sync. Now, if we would not have had this parent coffee, and especially if we would not have followed up with a personal phone call to each of those 9th grade parents, I don't know when or how or if these 3 resource people would have surfaced. Don't know that. As opposed to sending out a direct mail or an email, anybody interested in, please call the advancement office. You see the difference? It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing when we do things in terms of personal outreach. It is fascinating to watch and realize that people do give to people. They give to people. So, as we say, if you're going to make it work, please get out of the office. Please make sure you visit with people. And some folks will say, well, Frank, how do I do that? What are you talking about when you say, go meet with somebody and build a relationship? Well, let me share something with you. At the end of in between class 1 and class 2, I sent you a PDF of a brochure from a Catholic elementary school in Parrish who had just finished and was implementing their strategic plan for development and stewardship. That is a wonderful piece that principal and that pastor and development officer are going and having conversations with people about. But let's say you were not there. Let's say that this was not something that you did have available. But let's say that you and your school leaders, whoever they may be, have decided that over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that there are 4 or 5 vision components that you would like to see happen at your school. Well, let's say you took those vision components and on school stationery, you bullet pointed those components and put them on a piece of paper. You selected 10, 15, 20 people, 5, whatever works. And you call Mr. Johnson, you call Mrs. Adams, and you said, as the pastor, as the president, as the principal, as the board member, as the advancement officer, as the marketing director, Mr. Johnson, we are excited about some things that are going on here at our school. We are in the process of putting together a vision that is very compelling, we think, for the next 3 to 5 years here at the name of your school. I've selected 10 to 12 people that I'd like to sit down with. Maybe you can come here, I can come to you, we can have a cup of coffee, we can go to breakfast, we can go to lunch, and I'd like to share these vision ideas with you. I'm very interested in getting your best wisdom. I'm very interested in getting your feedback, because as we move forward with all of this, we want to make sure that we're not moving forward in a vacuum. We want to make sure that we do our due diligence and talk with people like yourself who can offer a great deal in regards to this. So if we could, I'd like to carve out some time, and if you could too, where we can get together for maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes. I've got next week, Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday mornings open, if that works for you. Now, folks, 90% of the people are going to respond positively. That has been our experience. Number two, in that conversation, you're going to find doors and windows that will open that you never knew were possible, because you're meeting eyeball to eyeball, person to person, relationship building, and you're asking for that person to get involved with their thoughts at that time. And maybe you end the conversation by saying, Bob, Mary, as we move forward on this vision, do you see yourself being involved in terms of helping us chart the course with these ideas? Not asking for money. Once again, you're inviting them to be a partner with you to make this vision come alive. So this is what we mean by this. This is what we mean by get out of the office, have a conversation. That's just one way. I'll be sending you what we call the president or the pastor or the principal cabinet, putting together something like that. That'll be one of the resource materials that I will send you between class 2 and class 3. That's another way. So in terms of moving it forward, eyeball to eyeball, as we said, interviews, cup of coffee meetings, like the coffees we had here, the home visits, planning and input sessions, reunions, neighborhood meetings where some of your parents would invite prospective parents who may be interested, that president-principal cabinet meeting that maybe meets twice a year that I just referred to. These are all ways that you can bring people in. Catholic School Connect groups, if you're familiar with Father James Mallon's book, Moving from Maintenance to Mission, Divine Renovation, he talks about connect groups. Why would you not have in your Catholic school connect groups for your new parents? Maybe there were 5 or 6 families that are new to you. And I know you have more than that, but I'm talking about in groups of 5 or 6, and maybe you have 1 or 2 people who have been with you who signed up to be an advancement ambassador, and maybe you connect those people where those new parents can be connected with 2 other families who have been there, and they can just talk. They could gather at school for a cup of coffee. They could gather in someone's home and just have a conversation. They would have somebody to connect to. Belonging leads to believing. Over and over again, we hear from new people, I wish someone would have reached out more, whether it be a parish or whether it be a school. And of course, things like core team meetings and meeting with alum classes and informational gathering sessions. These are all eyeball-to-eyeball opportunities, of which as we move through this course, we will mention many of them to you. Once again, just remember that ripple in the pond. That first ripple, we've got to move out from there. We've got to move out into that second, third, and fourth ripple in order to engage people. Sometimes we just personally communicate with the first ripple, and we send emails and direct mails and post things on the website and say, have you looked at the website? That's all fine and good. That announces, positions, reinforces. Doesn't close the deal. Doesn't seal the deal. Doesn't convince people. So as we look at this, build community through all of these communication vehicles, but please realize that the common denominator is doing it person to person, eyeball to eyeball. Now, 2 last thoughts. We have found over the last 5 or 10 years in Catholic secondary schools, we've seen a major trend of Catholic secondary schools hiring a communication director. This is a person that handles all the stuff we've just been talking about, but also does graphic design, and it's done in-house. Now, I presently am working with 3 schools that have that person in place, and it's remarkable what can be done immediately, right away. And you've got one person who's the clearinghouse. One person who's the clearinghouse. She or he is responsible for what goes out of that school. The other is this communication audit, an internal audit that you could take a look at. Now, here's another way to engage people, where you take a look at your parent base, your alum base, your parishioner base, and you would say, we have people here who have expertise in communications, in marketing, in website design, in graphic design. Identifying those 4, 5, 6, 7 people to come in one evening, laying all of your publication materials, putting your website up on a screen, and once again saying, how can we improve? You guys are experts in your field. Give us thoughts and ideas about how we can improve, and give them a pad of paper for them to jot their ideas down about all these things. We've had a number of schools that have done this and have walked away with some excellent suggestions. And not only that, but they've been instrumental in once again engaging people. People give to people, and they enjoy giving things that they are familiar with and can offer expertise about. In lesson 5, we talk about something that we referred to in class 1. You remember we shared with you that fundraising chart versus development chart. Fundraising dollars, development dollars, buy-sell mentality with fundraising dollars and Catholic development dollars, as that idea of philanthropic giving. There are many reasons we find that Catholic schools set up a development office, a development effort. We can go back years, we can talk about the present, we'll even talk about some in the future. And some of those reasons we hear through our workshops and through our consulting, through our webinars, is that, it's a shortfall in the budget. We need to tap into big bucks. Everyone's doing it. The one I always, kind of smile at is our alums owe us back. We need to write some grants because there's millions of dollars out there. All these are what I call the semi-wrong reasons and the myths of Catholic school development. Really, you start a true Catholic school development effort because you're interested in advancing the institution through relationships and through engaging people that can lead you to many, many resources, some of them financial. And so as we look at moving this forward, remember those 2 definitions. We realize that one of the biggest hurdles we find that Catholic schools are up against, some, not all, obviously, is those that have a fundraising culture. It's people feel nickel and dimed. People feel like there's one fundraising event after the other. I cannot tell you how many workshops I've conducted where a development officer will come up to me at the break or at the lunch or at the end of the day and say, I'm like the plate spinner in the circus. I go from one fundraising event to the next. And so we have developed a process where we're talking about developing and advancing our Catholic school. And with that thought in mind, let us walk through these steps. First of all, let's ask some questions. Why was development first started at your school? I think that's an important question. In some cases, it was started years ago. Who's responsible? Do your leaders? Does your board? Does your pastor? Does your president? Does your principal? Do your faculty and staff members? Do your parent leaders? Do your alum leaders? Does your parish council, your finance council, do they understand the difference between fundraising dollars and development dollars? Next question is, do your development efforts need to raise a certain amount of money to balance the budget? That's a reality. How many fundraisers does your school conduct, all told? What kind of approval process is in place? Does it seem that your development efforts move from one fundraising event to the other? Or your parents feel that that nickel and diming culture is there? And one of the things that we've seen is some schools have a person who is a director of fundraising events. And she or he does just that and no more. They run the auction and dinner dance. They run the golf tournament. They run the fair and the festival. And those are the three things they do. How important is it for you to move to development mode? Where you can move to this idea of inviting people to invest in a vision. Because like we said, if I want 20 bags of mulch for my spring garden, I'm really not interested, probably not that greatly interested in your mission and vision and where your school is going in the future. I want to pay a good, fair price. I want my 20 bags of mulch. Load them up on my pickup, and I'm out of there. So as we look at these questions, we realize there are steps to take. As we said, educating your leadership becomes so important. And by leadership, we mean the things we're discussing now. I've had two principals since class 1 that have called me up and said, Frank, I just want to let you know, we have bought a copy of the book for all of our board members. And I bought a copy of the book for my administrative team. We want to be on the same page. We want to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about when we talk about development dollars versus fundraising dollars. We want to make sure everybody understands when we talk about the 7 I's. We want to make sure everybody understands when we talk about, belonging leads to believing. We want to make sure everybody understands when we talk about the ripples of the pond. So educating that leadership becomes important. Determining how important it is to move from development culture to fundraising events. From fundraising events to development culture. The fact that you're going to move in that direction becomes really important. And realistically, you have to understand the budget considerations too. You can't just drop everything at once. That's why we say development/advancement takes 3 to 5 years to actually put into place and to make it work. And so what we're suggesting is that you create a visual, and that visual is on the next slide. We call it our fundraising chart, where on the left-hand column, as you'll see, FR stands for fundraising. So we have room for 25 of them. Who sponsors the fundraiser? What month of the year is the fundraiser? How much money did it gross? What was the net profit? How many people did it take to pull it off? And how many people hours did we have? On the right-hand side, it's who supported it? Who bought those raffle tickets? Who bought that sponsorship of the 18th hole of the golf tournament? And so you can see the legend up at the top, parents, parishioners, alums. So you would check that off. The most effective way I've ever seen, and I'm not saying to do this, but I'm telling you what was really, really effective, was the number of schools who have taken this visual. They actually have taped together 4 poster boards, and they have recreated this chart. And then they have brought it into a room. They've called together all the key people who head up the fundraising events and activities, and they've invited them to come in. They've posted this up on the wall and had people spend 10, 15 minutes looking at it. And then whoever is facilitating the meeting asks the question, what does this tell us? Over and over and over again, what it tells a Catholic school is that there are too many fundraisers. You're going to the same people to ask for the money. And above all, it's stepping on the toes of the annual fund. Because if I bought a $100 raffle calendar and a month later you're back asking me to consider a $1,000 gift in the major gift division of your annual fund, I may tell you I've already supported the school with the raffle calendar. I'm not going to do both. So as we continue moving with these steps, you need to educate and inform and present this visual. Number 6, form a subcommittee. Look at representation from the key groups that do the fundraising, the major fundraising activities and events, have this subcommittee create a mission and philosophy and rationale for what the purpose, create an application and approval process for people that want to do a fundraiser. Let's say by June 1st of the preceding next fiscal year, they would have to fill in the application and submit it. The application would be accepted, rejected, or amended, and then move forward to develop a plan over the next 3 to 5 years that would highlight the following, where the emphasis is on the annual fund. That is the single most important development dollars effort that your Catholic school could do. And that you've got 2 or 3 or maybe 4 major fundraisers. Maybe there is the infamous raffle that you've done for years and everybody is used to participating with it and it makes good money and you don't want to throw it away. Maybe there is the golf tournament. Maybe there is the fair festival, or maybe there is the auction and dinner dance. Maybe those are the main ones. And then if there's small fundraisers that do not interfere with the present donor base. Okay, I really don't think that the cheerleader car wash on Saturday morning is going to interfere with the present donor base. Nor do I think that this particular group, the Beta Club, selling brownies at halftime of the football game is going to interfere with your present donor base. But when your emphasis is on this, then let's continue the steps and you'll see what happens. So the subcommittee really is going to create an integrated, they're working with the advancement office and the administration. They're going to create an integrated annual fund in which they're looking to create three areas. Now, in the application process, there will be those clubs and organizations that are rejected and yet still need to be funded. So a percentage, not a large, but a percentage of that annual fund are for needed funds for those organizations, clubs, and teams. And you're asking those clubs and teams and organizations to have their families and friends to throw their weight behind the annual fund. And then obviously the other areas of the operational budget and then the new innovative programs that the annual fund needs to fund. You're also going to look to increase the donors every year by 10 to 15%, 12 to 15%, and a 90% retention rate. I'm often wondering why more schools don't look at that retention rate. You know, what if you have 500 donors one year, or let's just be very realistic and say your elementary school just starting with all this. Let's say you've got 80 donors one year, and in the second year you've got 100 donors. Well, that's great, but I certainly want to know who didn't from the first year. So you're going to want to build that development revenue around a strong integrated annual fund and 2 or 3 school-sponsored fundraisers. Once solidified, then you'd want to move forward with an organized major gift process, focusing on developing 25 to 50 portfolios. That's individual folders on financial leaders that you can certainly engage and involve who have already raised their hand, and they can certainly help your Catholic school. You're going to want to create an orientation process for parents and alums. They need to understand, like I mentioned in the coffee we did a couple of days ago, they need to understand that your development revenue is going to come primarily from what we talked about, the annual fund and those 3 or 4 major fundraisers and a strong organized major gift process. They need to understand, your students who will graduate and leave you, of how important it is for them to stay involved in the school, not just financially. And so each year, the challenge is to educate and inform the new groups that come in, as well as continue to educate and inform those that make up, the various constituencies. So overall themes in this class is eyeball-to-eyeball communication, making sure we move from a reactive culture of please give me your money, direct mail, into a proactive culture. And that becomes really important. The In the book, 25 Lessons Learned in 25 plus years, I just once again want to call to your attention on page 121 in section D, and it's called Parting Thoughts. There's a story there about my dad, and I grew up on a farm in South Louisiana, and I talk about the parallel between organic gardening and Catholic school development. Believe it or not, we're talking about the same thing. And so I encourage you on page one, it's 2 pages, 121 and 122. I encourage you to read that because I think you'll see a lot of what we mean by identifying and cultivating and developing and advancing and inviting, and what the harvest is. And the harvest is not just money. The harvest is that relationship that perpetuates itself year after year because it's so important to the individual. As we move forward from class 2 to class 3, within the next few days, you will receive the following. You'll get a PDF for the PowerPoint presentation. You'll get the YouTube video link for this recording, which will be much different than the one that we had earlier. Much different in the sense that I spent 10 minutes trying to figure out how to get the audio back. You'll receive supplementary materials to go along with this class. You'll receive the link to class number 3. You'll receive your homework assignment from class 2, this class, which covered, as we know, lesson 4 and 5. And this will be a very specific homework assignment, as you'll see. It comes from the workbook. And by the way, the workbook just got the final proof of the workbook today. It really looks nice. It's a full-size workbook that you get in a college class. And I think those of you who decide that you want to get that to go along with the text, I think you're going to realize how valuable that could be for you. But please email your homework to me and to Karen with your name on it. Please have your assignment in by Tuesday, September 26th. That's 2 weeks. And as we once again talked about in the first class and today's class, these were the lessons we've covered. In our upcoming class on September 28th, we're going to take a look at 3 lessons. Customer service culture, how do we establish that? Building relationships with our parents, mainly, how do we do that? And what is the value of the faculty, staff, and the board in advancement? What is that value? So as we move all this forward, you can see where we're going over the next couple of months as we wrap it up then on September 18th with the final lesson. So next class, lesson 6, customer service, building relationships, value of faculty staff. This is class number 3, September 28th at 1 p.m. Central Time. Final 2 thoughts. A Catholic school will always generate the amount of resources it deserves to generate. And what it deserves to generate will always be in direct relationship to the quality of its leadership, its vision, its programs, its Catholic identity, and its culture of belonging. Interesting quote. Agree or disagree? For those of you who may be going to the International Stewardship Convention in Atlanta coming up here starting Sunday, look forward quite possibly. I know several people have sent me an email and said would like to get together. They're planning to go. I'm going to be talking on Monday and Tuesday, Monday afternoon at 2, actually doing a talk very similar to one of the lessons today. And then on Tuesday, I'll be doing a talk on alumni involvement in Catholic schools. So if you're going, please, once again, stop by, say hi. Would love to see how you're doing and meet you. And once again, we'll be sending out all of this within the next day or 2. And you obviously won't be able to take the short survey because this is a recording of the class that I did after the original. But thanks again, all of you, for getting your homework in. Most all of you are right on target. And we know we have a number of you that are still working with it because of various circumstances, and we fully understand that. Look forward to class number 3 in a couple of weeks, and we'll be sending out all of this information to you as we move forward and move on to class 3 and begin to talk about customer service, of which really we've talked a lot about already. Anyway, hope this is going well for you, and look forward to the next class. God bless. Thank you.